amazing that we're able to continue spaceflight from such an important piece of ground.
Absolutely. And in thinking about all of the science that's going to be performed on this AX2 mission, it made me look at the calendar and actually see that Space Lab was launched from this same pad 50 years ago to this year, so 1973. And that was, of course, a huge progressive step in doing scientific research in space. And so we have this really cool full circle moment where we're initiating a big step in commercial spaceflight that's really going to progress the research that's done in low Earth orbit, tying it back to the same pad where Peggy launched, and even before that, where Skylab, one of our influential science components of space exploration, was launched from as well. Really cool history, like you're saying.
This here an exterior view of the Crew Access Arm and Dragon Freedom. Well, today we are carrying 4 people to the space station. Dragon can actually seat up to 7. The additional 3 crew members would be located basically under where the 4 seats that we use as we see today in lieu of cargo. So underneath the astronauts, as we see now, there is actually cargo located underneath them. Within that cargo will be things that they use like food and water, as well as the clothes that they will get to change into once they are able to take off or doff their spacesuits. Once they reach orbit, they'll be able to take off the spacesuits and change into other clothes and basically sleep in that while they make their way to the International Space Station. We can see here the tablets that they follow along with the procedures on the left leg, but on the right leg, we see another rectangular shape. That is the connection point for the umbilical, and that is where the basically interfaces for flowing, again, some more of that cooled nitrox, which is a nitrogen-oxygen mixture. That air gets flowed into the suits to help keep them comfortable. It's the same stuff that scuba divers use in their breathing tanks. The umbilical is also what connects the electrical and communication and avionics. So that's how we basically get telemetry to and from the suit, and in addition to those communication packages. Now, the seats that they are sitting in are custom sized for each astronaut. So if you think of the human body, and some people might have longer legs and shorter torsos, and vice versa, where they might have longer torsos and shorter legs. Thought we were going to get some communications there. Sounds like we had some in-capsule audio, so that's good to hear starting to come through. But yeah, all the length of the seat that they are sitting in, as well as the length of the footrest and the length of the armrest, are all sized appropriately for each astronaut. So really helps to make sure that they stay comfortable as well as safe through all phases of the mission. Their spacesuits are also custom sized, and they actually come here to Hawthorne not only for hours and hours of training on procedures and operations, but they also come on site here to try on the suits and make sure that everything is fitting well, make sure that as they go through, the motions of executing, something while they're on orbit, making sure that everything is super comfortable and nothing is rubbing in the wrong places.
Since the beginning of the space race in the 1960s, a custom patch has been used to represent and identify individual missions and their crew. It is also a long-held custom that the crew influence or outright design their own patch, injecting it with symbolism and personal elements to commemorate their journey. This crew has continued this long-standing tradition with their official AX2 mission patch. Take a look. The AX2 mission patch highlights the beauty of space, hope for the future, and the important role of the ISS to unite the best aspects of humanity. Shown prominently are the mission name, AX2, the family names of the crew members, and the flags of the United States and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the 2 nations represented on board today's flight. There are 5 shapes drawn as constellations, and these represent the crew's intention to focus on inspiration, education, and teaching through STEAM education initiatives. And so there's a constellation for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. The arched path leading from the Earth to space is colored lavender, which is a culture significant in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, symbolizing hospitality. That arched path and color also reflect KSA's desire to be part of the space sector and position itself as a contributor to the global space community. Then, naturally, the space station is central to the image as the destination of this crew, while Earth is featured with prominent horizon lines symbolizing optimism, hope, and inspiration. Just as you see this mission patch worn by the crew on their flight suits, this patch is currently adorning the walls of Axiom Space's Mission Control in Houston and is placed in a position of honor everywhere this crew is being supported for the duration of their mission.
You can see live views there inside of Dragon Freedom. Now, this capsule that they are flying in is a reused capsule. It has been to space before. Additionally, Falcon 9 is also a reusable vehicle. It's the world's first orbital class reusable rocket. And while today marks the first flight for this rocket, it will be the second flight for the Dragon spacecraft. Reusability is a big deal, not just for us at SpaceX, but also for the future of spaceflight. Reusing hardware, similar to how airlines reuse aircraft, allows us to refly the most expensive part of the rocket, which of course in turn drives down the cost of space access. Imagine if you had to fly on a brand new airplane every time you took a flight. Most people would not be able to afford that plane ticket. In the same way, a fully and rapidly reusable launch system is the key to becoming a multiplanetary species. To date, SpaceX has completed 39 Dragon missions, including 36 visits to the International Space Station, and 18 of those 36 missions have actually been on reflown Dragons, which is pretty awesome. As you've heard me mention before, the Dragon capsule flying today, named Freedom, will be making its second trip to space. It previously supported the NASA Crew 4 mission in April 2022, so just over a year ago. Now, as for our launch vehicle, the Falcon 9 rocket has completed 224 total launches, and 70% of those have been on reflown rockets. The booster supporting today's mission will be lifting off for the first time, as you might be able to tell by the fact that that first stage is shiny and white. The way that I often tell people is, if the paint matches the second stage, it's a new rocket. Now, speaking of firsts, today marks the first time that we're landing Falcon 9 back on land for a crew mission. Previous crew missions landed on a drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. So we actually see a live view now of LZ-1. That is the intended landing destination for the booster today. Landing back on land has a lot of benefits. It eliminates the need for our recovery team to be stationed out at sea for days and improves our turnaround time to get Falcon 9 ready to fly again. So I also personally love the land landings because the Space Coast can actually see and hear the booster return to LZ-1. So super exciting.
It's just under 2 hours, 36 minutes to the launch of Axiom 2. As you've seen, the 4-person crew is in the Dragon spacecraft. We're preparing for the first of a series of communication checks. These checks will be with the SpaceX core, and they verify the crew connections in Dragon through an umbilical that remains hooked up to the capsule until liftoff. As I said, the comm checks are going to be with core. That's a member of the Dragon Ops team, and that operations team is located here in the Mission Control Center at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. The Falcon 9 and Dragon launch teams are located in Firing Room 4 at Kennedy Space Center. Now, next activities for the crew, once we get through that initial set of comm checks, we're going to be watching the seat rotation into the launch position. We've also got a suit leak check for several minutes, make sure everything is buttoned up and tight. And then we also have additional communications checks. These will be through RF antennas and NASA's Tracking and Data Relay System, or you may hear it referred to as TDRS, TDRS for short, and those will be comm checks with the Dragon team. Now, currently, the flight hardware Falcon 9 and Dragon launch teams continue to monitor the vehicles. We're not working any significant issues at this time. We are continuing to just watch the weather. It's Florida, it's late afternoon. Ground level continues to look good. Winds are low, and we've got nice looking skies there on the camera view on the left. We are watching upper altitude winds in case some of the anvil clouds do drift over the launch site or the ascent trajectory in the last hour. Now for upper altitude winds, SpaceX uses a Doppler radar to study wind direction and speed. And that allows the SpaceX structures and control engineers to calculate loads on the vehicle and verify that we're good to fly. The Space Force Range releases balloons for us, and that gets low altitude wind data. That supports Dragon's contingency launch commit criteria. But right now, T-minus 2 hours and 34 minutes. Everything continues to look good. Next up, we're waiting for comm checks. We see the crew right there. Make sure that their connections through the seats, through the umbilical are good. They'll talk to the core, and then we'll take it from there with the remaining series of checkouts of comms, seat rotation, and the suit leak checks. A minute ago, we saw that live view of landing zone 1. There's the crew. Waves all around. The SpaceX support team is backing out of the capsule right now as we get ready for comm checks. Bigger thing is we'll then go into seat rotation. So we want to make sure everybody's out of the way, clear the seats, make sure everything underneath the seats are all stowed for flight and ready to go. We talked about landing zone 1, showed you a live view a few minutes ago. We're hoping to get a nice view of the first stage when it comes back to Earth. About 8.5 minutes after launch, we ought to see that coming back down into that landing zone 1 view. Right now, just waiting for the word from the crew that they're ready to begin the communications checks. Coming up on 2 hours, 32 minutes till launch. On the Falcon 9 side currently, the chief engineer is mostly just going around the room, checking with the SpaceX Falcon engineers. They're continuing to top off gas pressure in the helium supply that's used to repressurize first and second stages as we head to space. The attitude control system, gas supplies, the landing leg supplies. We're at pressure. We just top it off a little bit as we continue through the countdown. Other than that, nothing significant on the Falcon 9 right now. Everybody's mostly just looking over the data, watching their systems. Our next major activity on Falcon 9 will actually occur at about T-minus 1 hour and 10 minutes. That's when we're going to begin to bleed in the fuel into the Merlin engine chambers, actually into the jacket where it's used to cool the nozzles as we head out into space. So that'll be our next major activity. We have also done flight termination system checkouts a couple hours ago. Everything looks good there. And the view you can see right now at 39A, Falcon 9, fairly quiet at the moment. Dragon also having the more activity as the crew has ingressed. And right now we're getting ready to begin checks between Dragon and the ground.
We're now T-minus 2 hours, 30 minutes, and 42 seconds until liftoff of Axiom 2. Heading to the International Space Station, we have a T0 time of 5:37 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:37 p.m. Pacific Time. As John mentioned, and as you can see on screen, weather's cooperating at the moment. We can see the exterior of the capsule there. This is actually a great shot because not only can you see the service section, which is where the crew is, you can also see another great view of the trunk. This is where we are able to put unpressurized unpressurized cargo, and that trunk is the part that will be jettisoned before the crew actually return to Earth. Great view coming to us from our helicopter circling the pad. You can also see below the trunk the white second stage, below that the black inner stage. where we have the grid fins attached, and then below that, the white first stage. We are standing by for communications checks with the crew. So it will be a series of checks to ensure that all seats are able to communicate with the teams, both at the Launch Control Center in Florida, as well as here in Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. After we get through comm checks, we will perform leak checks on the suits. That's important, just to ensure that all of those zippers on the suits and the fasteners are all in the in their final position, they're closed, and we pressurize the suit in order to basically test that it can hold that pressure over a period of time. In the event of an egress scenario, or excuse me, not egress, of a launch escape scenario after liftoff, the spacesuit actually functions as a mini spaceship within the spaceship. It's able to hold that pressure while the crew return to Earth. Once those suit leak checks are complete, the closeout team will then close the side hatch. As I mentioned before, the side hatch is the door that they use to go in and out of the capsule while they are on Earth. The hatch that they use while they are on station is actually the forward hatch, which is located under the nose cone, which you can distinguish there at the very top of the Dragon capsule, the pointy part that has that diagonal line that indicates where the nose cone is. And that will rotate back. It'll open up and expose the forward hatch. And that's what the Dragon capsule uses to autonomously dock with the International Space Station. So once that side hatch is closed by the closeout team here on the ground,
SpaceX Dragon, comm check from seat 2.
Loud and clear, Peggy, from SpaceX. How me?
We have you loud and clear.
So it sounds like these comm checks.
All right, good afternoon. Please let us know when you get to step 1.3 and are ready for umbilical comm checks.
Wilco. And SpaceX Dragon, we're at step 1.3, ready for a comm check.
SpaceX copies. Stand by for umbilical comm checks.
Wilco.
Great view of the Axiom 2 crew there as we are standing by for those comm checks.
Commander, pilot, MS1, MS2, comm check.
Commander has you loud and clear.
Pilot, loud and clear. MS1, loud and clear.
MS2, loud and clear.
And core, loud and clear. Umbilical comm check complete. Please report when ready for seat rotation.
All right, all good news there. All those comm checks checked out, and we are now.
SpaceX Dragon, we are ready for seat rotation.
SpaceX copies. Will report when initiating.
As the name indicates, these seats are going to rotate back into the launch position. This will enable the crew to have easier access to those crew displays located above their heads.
Dragon SpaceX initiating seat rotation.
Dragon copies.
We can see those seats now rotating back into the launch position.
On the left.
This moment must feel like that moment on a roller coaster when you're in position to go.
We are at T-minus
Dragon
2 hours.
SpaceX, seats are in the launch position.
Dragon copies.
Okay, a comm there confirming that the seat rotation has been completed. We are at T-minus 2 hours and 22 minutes and 6 seconds from liftoff of the AX-2 mission from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying 4 Axiom astronauts, Peggy Whitson, John Schaffner, Ali Al-Karni, and Rihanna Barnawi, aboard the Crew Dragon spacecraft. It's been a very exciting day so far. The crew shifted their sleep cycle to match that of the International Space Station and are currently inside Dragon going through their pre-launch checklists.
As of now, the astronauts have already completed their comms checks. That helps to make sure that they can communicate with the teams on the ground. Their seats have rotated from upright to their reclined launch position, which allows them to see and access the display panels there above their head. Up next will be the leak checks to make sure their spacesuits are in proper working condition before liftoff and to do final inspection of the spacecraft. So at this point in time, we're going to stand by, await for those suit checks. We expect them to happen here in the next couple of minutes. After those are complete, the closeout team will be closing the side hatch for flight. That's one of the key.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for Section 2 suit leak check preparation.
Copy, go Section 2, suit leak check preparation.
Once the suit leak checks are complete and the closeout team closes the side hatch for flight, things will start moving a lot quicker. The opportunity for going back and rechecking, everything is still, we're able to do that before the side hatch closes. So that's why we wait to get through the comm checks, the suit leak checks, the seat rotation. We wait to close the side hatch until all of those are complete so that in the event that, for example, if a zipper isn't quite in place, one of the closeout team members can re-enter the capsule, help the crew member get that into place and re-perform the suit leak check or whatever it might be. Now, after we get that side hatch closed, the closeout team will depart the pad, and then around T-minus 1 hour and 30 minutes, we'll do launch escape system checks. And then we fast forward to T-minus 42 minutes, and things really start happening in rapid succession.
SpaceX Dragon, tear is complete. We're ready for leak check.
Dragon copies and concurs. You are go for Section 3 suit leak check.
Copy. Go for Section 3 suit leak check.
All right, so that communication back and forth there between Commander Peggy Whitson and SpaceX Core, or Crew Operations and Resource Engineer, on that console today is Arthur Berrialt. That is the primary voice that we will be hearing communicating to the crew members. That back and forth just confirming that the crew is ready to go to march into that next step, which, as they said, would be the suit leak checks. Essentially, we inflate the suits to a certain pressure for a couple of minutes, and we monitor that pressure level during that time to basically ensure and check that we're not losing any pressure. If we see a pressure loss, that's an indication that something isn't quite fitting right. Maybe there's a little bit of FOD in the visor, so it's not closing completely, or the zipper might not be zipped up completely. So one of the closeout team members will go in and help resolve whatever is causing that, and then they, in that case, would reperform the suit leak check. But when we did a dress rehearsal on Friday, we got to this step, and they breezed right through it.
Yeah.
So. You can actually kind of see the crew there just resting pretty comfortably while these leak checks are underway. So suit leak checks are now underway. We're just holding that pressure and monitoring that pressure level in all 4 suits to ensure that there's no leakage. For those of you that have just recently joined us, we have Mission Specialist Rayana Barnawi on the left, the far left seat. That is seat number 4. And seat number 3 is pilot John Schaffner. Next to him, Commander Peggy Whitson, and then on the far right in seat number 1, Ali Al-Karni. We can see the SpaceX closeout team there preparing for the side hatch closure, but like I said, we won't complete that until we have confirmation of 4 good suit leak checks. Now, the area that we see here, the white room, is environmentally controlled. That helps to ensure that Florida insects, humidity, none of that gets into the capsule. That we're able to maintain a clean environment.
You could see them inspecting with the light. You really want to go over that with a fine-tooth comb.
Dragon, we see 4 good suits.
SpaceX copies and concurs. 4 good suits. At this time, closeout team will perform final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Proceed to Section 4, side hatch close, and report when ready to close hatch.
We'll go for Dragon.
All right, good news there. We have 4 good suit leak checks. Closeout team now preparing to close the side hatch. Duke, as you mentioned, yeah, they are really inspecting that side hatch to ensure that we get a good seal there. Very similar to the suit leak checks that we just performed, we will do a leak check on that side hatch where we inflate the seal around the hatch again, to a certain pressure for a certain amount of time. We monitor that pressure for any decay or pressure loss.
And SpaceX Dragon, we are ready for the closeout team to close the hatch.
SpaceX copies.
I think that's a very polite way of saying it's time for them to go so we can go to space. As I mentioned before, the primary voice that we hear communicating with the crew is the SpaceX Core, which stands for Crew Operations Resource Engineer. That person on console, while it's not the same individual through all phases of flight, but that seat is there and it is filled by different individuals throughout the mission, and that is the primary communication to the crew. That person is responsible for updating them on statuses and confirming with the crew that they are ready to proceed to the next step, as we've been hearing them that back and forth this morning. Or I should say this afternoon now at this point. Once we get the side hatch closed, we can see that there's still a closeout team member there under their feet, kind of in that cargo location. It's kind of hard to visualize, but if you want to compare it between the view on the left and the view on that right, on the right-hand side, that closeout team member.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check over ground stations.
Dragon has you loud and clear over ground stations.
Core loud and clear. Ground station comm check complete. Stand by for TDRS comm check.
Should be just a few minutes from side hatch closing, but until then we still have a good view of the crew in the capsule with one of the closeout crew members in the lower part of the screen there. You see them working on their tablets that the crew has. They each have one. Nice view of the Dragon capsule on your left and some great weather out there.
We can see that final closeout crew member making the last preparations and now popping out. So they have now egressed and are back in that white room. As I was saying before, it's kind of hard to visualize if you've never been inside the Dragon capsule, you know, kind of the orientation of where the viewpoint is to the right. Imagine that the crew tablet that we see Peggy and John referencing and working off of is kind of around where those two dots are on the left-hand side of your screen, those two dots on the exterior of the Dragon capsule. You can kind of imagine if you were to draw a line between those two dots, that's roughly where the crew display panels are. And then the crew are essentially laying on their backs, or kind of on their backs, not completely, but they're laying on their backs underneath that. So when we saw that closeout team member there under their feet, if you imagine somebody kind of working in the area.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check over TDRS.
Dragon has you loud and clear over TDRS.
Core loud and clear. TDRS comm check complete. Stand by for comm checks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Standing by.
Dragon, this is DC on countdown 1. Comm check.
DC, we have you loud and clear.
DC, loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with MD.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1, comm check.
MD, we have you loud and clear on countdown 1.
MD loud and clear, stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground, comm check.
MD on Dragon to ground, we have you loud and clear.
MD loud and clear, stand by for comm checks with LD.
Dragon, LD on countdown 1, comm check.
We have you loud and clear on countdown 1, LD.
LD is you loud and clear as well. Stand by for my comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, LD, Dragon to ground 1, comm check.
We have you loud and clear, LD.
LD also has you loud and clear.
Dragon SpaceX, launch configuration and comm checks complete.
Dragon copies.
All right, so we're finishing up with